Welcome everyone to Fundamentals of Kabbalah and Chassidut. We are continuing our series on Ma'aseh Merkavah, workings of the Chariot. We are getting close to the end of our series. Where we left off last time was after learning for months from the book of Ezekiel and doing our best to understand Ma'aseh Merkavah, the workings of the Chariot. Last week, we dedicated the learning to going much farther back. It's something that we've mentioned many times, that Ma'aseh Merkavah is not exclusively talking about only the vision of Ezekiel, or even Isaiah, or Zechariah, or Daniel. All the different people that we mentioned who are considered to have had visions in the, we'll call it the category of Ma'aseh Merkavah. Last week, we went all the way back to Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and we showed how the mystical tradition in Israel goes all the ways back to the patriarchs. The matriarchs were all prophetesses as well. And we discussed specifically verses where Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov can be seen to be meditating and having deep visions. This is all Ma'aseh Merkavah. Then we discussed a bit of the sages and how they also were involved in what's called Ma'aseh Merkavah. So the whole point was to expand our perspective, our context of what Ma'aseh Merkavah is. And we discussed also that the secret part of Ma'aseh Merkavah, as written in the Mishnah, that a teacher who knows Ma'aseh Merkavah is only allowed to give it over to one student at a time. And that student had to be on a very, very high level. So we asked a simple question. Well, we've been learning about it for 3 months. So, how can it be just one person? And the answer, which we really gave in the very beginning of the series, I'm just reviewing for people who maybe were not here last week. First of all, what we call Ma'aseh Merkavah is written in the Bible, in the first chapter, or even the first 11 chapters of Ezekiel. So obviously it's not so secret that it's right there in the Bible for anyone to read it. And second of all, it's the Haftorah of Shavuos. And like any Haftorah, any part of the Torah, we're meant to study it. But the secret part of Ma'aseh Merkavah is the mystical tradition of the type of meditation that would get one to elevate their consciousness to the point that their experience was what we call Ma'aseh Merkavah. That's why last week we discussed at length Arba Shenichnasu LaPardes, the 4 that went into the orchard. And it was considered that's what they were doing. That was Ma'aseh Merkavah. All of this was a review. So where we're going to start tonight is, I'm just going to bring 2 more incidences from way before the vision of Ezekiel, again, to try to broaden our scope of this idea of Ma'aseh Merkavah, the workings of the chariot. And again, the chariot is symbolic for riding on something towards a higher level of consciousness. That is the Merkava. And we learned also that the sages said, Ha'avot hen ha'merkava. The patriarchs, they were the chariot, meaning they were the human chariots through which one God revealed himself with the purpose that eventually all of mankind would be aware of one God, of monotheism. So the Avot, they are the chariot. They are the channels. They are the vehicle through which the oneness of God is revealed in the world. That's the ultimate of Ma'aseh Merkavah. So the two incidences that we're going to talk about, we'll start with Yaakov Avinu and his dream of a ladder that was firmly entrenched in the earth, and its head reached into the heavens. Angels were going up and down the ladder, and then God appears to Yaakov at the top of the ladder and basically assures him that God will be with him and he will protect him and inspire him that he will be able to fulfill his mission in the world. And then Yaakov wakes up and he says, God was in this place and I didn't know. Then he pours oil over the stones, and he says, this is the house of God. So that's basically the dream. It's perhaps the most famous of all of the 10 archetypal dreams that are in the book of Genesis. In almost any art museum where you have religious art, and I'm not talking about really Jewish art, invariably you will see a depiction of Yaakov and the angels and the ladder. So how is this connected to Ma'aseh Merkavah? So first of all, as we know, one of the main call it players in Ma'aseh Merkavah were the different angels, the Chariot, the Ophanim, and later the Kruvim. And here, Yaakov is experiencing angels going up and down the ladder. And here we can, in a symbolic form. So first of all, the Sulam, if you take the letters of Sulam and you permute them differently, it's Semel. Semel means a symbol. Symbology is based on this word, semel. It's a sign, it's a metaphor, an allegory, a symbol. So this ladder this dream is probably the most symbolic of all dreams. In fact, I wrote a whole book about it, basically about this dream, the mystical power of dreams. So here, Yaakov is experiencing angels, just like Ezekiel, just like Isaiah. But here, Yaakov is a full 1,000 years before Isaiah and Ezekiel and Zechariah. The ladder, in a sense, is the Merkava. The angels are going up and down. The ladder is like a vehicle that they are ascending and descending on. And just like in Ezekiel's vision, after the whole first chapter, the first chapter ends that Ezekiel finally has a vision of God, and then God speaks to him. And that's how the first chapter ends. God speaks to Ezekiel. Here, Yaakov has this dream, and God, who's positioned at the top of the ladder, here, God was in Ezekiel, God was riding the chariot. Here, God is at the top of the ladder. So I'm trying to say that in a certain way, the ladder is a chariot. And God is at the top of the ladder. We have discussed many times that there are different levels of perspective to see the entire vision, going from instructions of how to meditate that would allow one to experience Ma'aseh Merkavah. And the other was that the whole vision is really a preparation for God revealing to Ezekiel the call it the details of the destruction of the temple. And here we learned very much about paradox. So I'm revisiting this because according to the Midrash, when Yaakov is watching the angels, the ones going up and coming down, the Midrash says that each time the angels went up and came down represented one of the exiles. So the Midrash says that first he saw the angels going up 70 rungs of the ladder, and then the angels came down. That was the 70 years in Babylonia. And then he saw, I believe it was 52 stairs or rungs. That was the second exile of Persia. And then the exile of Greece. And then the Midrash says that as Yaakov is having this vision of the exiles, the angels kept on going up and they were not coming down. And it says Yaakov became very fearful because they just kept on going up and up, which represented an exile that maybe would never end. And in the Midrash, just like God was at the top of the ladder and spoke, very encouragingly to Yaakov, in the Midrash, Yaakov kind of cries out. Wait 1 second. Yaakov cries out, "Will this exile ever end?" And God said, "I myself will bring this angel down," meaning I myself will guarantee the end of this exile. That, of course, was the fourth exile of Rome, which we are still in. We are still considered in the fourth exile, even though we're back in Israel. We have 1 foot in redemption, but we don't have 2 feet. And so therefore, just like Ezekiel, because remember, once God spoke to him at the beginning of the 2nd chapter, it was all about the coming destruction of the temple and Ezekiel's role in trying to warn the people, trying to get them to do tshuva. So here also in Yaakov's dream, it's very similar. He experiences all of the exiles. A different Midrash says he also was able to see in prophecy the destruction of the temple. So we see a lot of similarities between Yaakov's dream and Ezekiel's vision. The difference is Yaakov's dream is actually around 1,200 years before Ezekiel. And yet the same themes are being played out in Yaakov's dream, which of course was a prophetic dream. And so that's why I wanted to bring it. Also, a different Midrash says he also saw the giving of the Torah at Sinai. So Yaakov saw all of this in this dream. In the text itself, it doesn't really tell us everything he experienced in the dream. But the Midrash is telling us that it was a totally prophetic dream. And that is why God comes and assures him and encourages him that I will protect you. He's not talking just about Yaakov. Remember, Yaakov eventually has his name changed to Yisrael. He represents all of us. So what Yaakov was experiencing was he was seeing all of Jewish history as it would play itself out. Later, when he's on his deathbed, he tells his sons, gather around, I will reveal to you what will happen in the end of days. He had already been shown all of Jewish history, including the final redemption. But at that point, the Shekhinah left him, and he was not able to fully reveal to his sons how Jewish history would play itself out. Some say because Yaakov understood that it would take literally thousands of years, and God was telling him, it's best not to tell them that you're going to have to go through 4 exiles and everything you're going to have to go through until you get to redemption. So here we just see a very, very close parallel between the prophecy of Yaakov and the prophecy of Ezekiel, and especially the ability to understand the latter as the chariot. And Yaakov was riding the chariot as all of this was being revealed to him. But ultimately, it was God at the top of the ladder, just like in Ezekiel's vision. When Ezekiel finally sees a vision of God, God was riding the chariot, as it were. Again, we're talking in symbolic terms, and then speaks to him. The second incident that I want to talk about is the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. And this is something throughout the series we have touched on a number of times, but here I'll try to bring it all together. And the reason that it's so important is that for all practical purposes, the experience of the people at Sinai was what we would call a mass vision of Ma'aseh Merkavah. It wasn't an individual. It was an entire people that were experiencing an out-of-body, above nature, miraculous type of revelation. And in various midrashim, we're told that the 7 heavens opened up, that time, space, and soul all merged together. That's when it says that the mountain was full of smoke, ashan. And we've learned this many times. Ashan, smoke, the 3 letters, the ayin stands for olam, world, space. The shin is year or time. And the nun is nefesh, consciousness. And that's why it says at Sinai that the people saw the sounds of the torches and saw the sounds of the shofar and saw the sounds, the kolot that were at Mount Sinai. This is what is called synesthesia, the crossing of the senses. It's a real thing that people on rare occasions can experience. The different physical senses cross, and you're able to see what usually you only hear, and hear what you usually only see, and the other senses as well. So all of this is very clear that it was really a once in a history kind of experience. And what makes it so unique And why this whole idea of Ma'aseh Merkavah is so important to our mystical tradition is that most religions, philosophical pathways throughout history are really started by an individual who has revelations and then teaches to other people. Sometimes whole religions are born from this kind of religious experience of individuals. Here we have an entire people experiencing what they did at Sinai. And we have to understand that there is what's called physical DNA, and there's what's called spiritual DNA. And they actually know now, it's a known idea that through meditation, different healing practices, epiphanies, revelations, it can affect the physical DNA. It can actually physically change the DNA. It's not something that happens every day, but they have tracked that different experiences have that ability. So we can't underestimate the impression of what Mount Sinai did to every future Jewish soul. It left an impression that affected both the physical and spiritual DNA of the Jewish people. And since we can explain it or describe it as a mass revelation of Ma'aseh Merkavah, so this it takes on a whole different meaning, this whole idea. And the reason I'm emphasizing this is that, of course, Mount Sinai is approximately 600 years before Isaiah, 800 years before Ezekiel. Here, an entire people experienced Ma'aseh Merkavah. Also in the Torah, when you read just the physical descriptions of the phenomenon that were happening, the mountain was on fire. It was full of smoke. There was a great darkness. There was a cloud. These are all the elements of the first verses of Ezekiel. That's why it's so important, because it's not only like it was a mass experience of Ma'aseh Merkavah, the actual physical description that Ezekiel gives is actually in the Torah for what happened at Mount Sinai. And also, when God, first there was all the phenomenon. The mountain was shaking. There was fire. There was smoke. There were the sound of the shofar. Keep this in mind, because we're going to come back to the shofar. All of this was like unworldly. And afterwards, then God begins to speak the 10 commandments. So the same thing with Ezekiel. First, he experiences all of this phenomenon, the whirlwind and the cloud and the fire and the noga and the chashmal. All of this was what he was experiencing. Only at the end, God begins to speak with him. That's exactly what happened at Sinai. All of the preparation beforehand, and then God begins to speak. And the reaction of the people in Ezekiel were also the same. We learned this, that when God began to speak to Ezekiel, he fell on his face in total awe and fear. And God actually helped him stand up. And it said that a spirit entered into Ezekiel, which gave him the strength to be able to hear what God was saying to him. What happened at Mount Sinai? God spoke the first 2 commandments. And we're told, everyone's learned this midrash, that with every word that God said, their souls left their bodies. And then God sent angels, and basically it was the experience of the resurrection of the dead. And then God spoke the next word, and their souls left their bodies. It was too much. So here, and then they come after the first 2 commandments, they come and they say to Moshe, this is too much for us. We're not going to be able to live through this. I mean, how many times can your soul leave your body, have a near-death experience, and expect to come back? And so then Moshe said the other 8 commandments. They only heard the first 2 from God, the other 8. But it was very similar with Ezekiel. When God finally spoke to him, it was too much for him. So these parallels are very, very important. It's very, very important because it puts Ma'aseh Merkavah in a much bigger context, a much bigger perspective, that this was not an experience of just individuals throughout history, whether it's the 4 who entered the orchard or the different prophets. But here was I'm using the word again, a mass experience of Ma'aseh Merkavah. Also, we have the angels. We're told when the Jewish people said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear. They said to God, we're ready. Like, you want to give us the Torah? We will do it. And even if we don't understand it, we trust you. Hopefully, we will come to understand it. Na'aseh v'nishma. The Midrash says that when they said Na'aseh v'nishma, angels came and placed crowns on their heads. So here, also at Mount Sinai, we have this idea of angels. We also have the idea of angels coming with flags. The Midrash says that these angels coming with the crowns had flags. And this is a whole different subject, so I don't want to get into it too much. But the Jewish people see these angels with flags and they say, we also want to have flags. And God says, you want to have flags? I'll give you flags. And this is the secret of how each tribe in the desert had a flag and had a symbol on the flag. So the Slonim Rebbe says, what are we being taught here? What's the big idea of having flags? And so he explains that when our tradition is angels only have one task at a time. They usually don't multitask. They have a task, they do it, and then they go on to the next task. That's almost a definition of an angel. Just like we learn in Pirkei Avot, if you do a mitzvah, you create an angel. That individual act creates an individual angel. And the opposite, if you do the opposite of doing a mitzvah, you create a prosecutor. Again, these are symbolic terms that everything we think say, and do creates energy. That's what angels are. Remember, their energy forms. And so the Slonim Rebbe says, what turned the people onto the flags? Purpose. They could sense that the angels were full of purpose, and that turned them on. We also want to live with a sense of purpose. And so God says, you want purpose? I'll give you purpose, Jewish people. You got it. My whole point here is the whole Sinai experience, according to Midrash, was full of angels also. It was full of angels. And as we discussed, the idea of paradox running through all of Ezekiel's vision, paradox was running through all of the receiving of the Torah in Sinai also, because it was otherworldly. Physical and spiritual just melded together. All the dimensions, time, space, and soul. This is actually the cutting edge of physics today, is the merger of time, space, and consciousness. Okay. Now, I want to introduce a new idea here, and I'm doing it specifically because this is the last class before Rosh Hashanah. And this is a Torah from Rav Ginsburg. In the beginning, we're not going to understand its connection to Rosh Hashanah, but at the end, it's all going to connect to Rosh Hashanah. And that's why I wanted to give it over now. So, something that we've discussed throughout this series is the connection between what's called Ma'aseh Bereishit and Ma'aseh Merkavah. The secrets of creation, Ma'aseh Bereishit, and the secrets of the Chariot. These are the two main themes of Jewish mystical tradition. These two things in the tractate of Chagiga, the chapter that we've been concentrating on. This is where it begins with Ma'aseh Bereishit, and then it goes to Ma'aseh Merkava. And it's all in a very, very condensed form. It's approximately 5 or 6 pages of the Gemara. Someone might say, only 5 or 6 pages? Like, I could read 5 or 6 pages in a couple of minutes. Well, I can guarantee you that people spend their entire life trying to understand these 5 pages and everything that it represents and how to integrate it into our own lives. So in Tractate Chagiga, these two go together. Ma'aseh Bereishit, Ma'aseh Merkava. So Rav Ginsburg gives a number of connections between these two different traditions. So first of all, he says, the obvious thing is Ma'aseh Bereishit is concentrated on the 7 days of creation. That is what Ma'aseh Bereishit is. And it continues, though, into the second telling of the story. Remember, the Torah goes through the first 7 days and then starts a recap. So Ma'aseh Bereishit includes that. The recap is almost exclusively about the creation of human beings and what happened in the Garden of Eden, the eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and then the expulsion. All of that is part of Ma'aseh Bereishit. Remember, we learned the introduction in the 9th, 10th, and 11th chapter of Ezekiel of the Kruvim, Well, the Kruvim, their first appearance is the ones that are guarding the way to the Garden of Eden after Adam and Eve were expelled. So here already we see a very deep connection. So Rav Ginsburg says, and in a certain way, Ma'aseh Bereishit leads to Ma'aseh Merkavah. Now what that means is, and you could see it in the Gemara as well, Ma'aseh Bereishit is considered relatively simpler than Ma'aseh Merkavah. And the reason is, and this is something that we're still going to get into, Sean brought it up a few weeks ago, that the word Merkava, the root of Merkava, Resh Chaf Bet, are the same letters of the river where Ezekiel is having this vision, the river Kavar. Same letters, just permuted differently. And of course, the chariot is a rechev. That's why it's called Merkava. It's a rechev. But also the word itself means murchav, means complex. In modern Hebrew, something that's complex uses these same letters, is murchav. So Rav Ginsburg says, and until the creation of Adam, that was Ma'aseh Bereishit. When the creation of Adam leads Ma'aseh Bereishit into Ma'aseh Merkava. Why? Because a human being in relation to all other creations is complex. Now, how is it complex? We'll understand in a second, is simply the idea of body and soul. The merger of physical and spiritual. And this we've learned many times. If you take the word Adam, the Aleph of Adam is the divine soul. And the Dam means blood, is the body. So a human being is Murkav, is a composite of physical and spiritual, soul and body. In poetic terms, sometimes angelic and demonic, all of the different opposites that we might think of. So now we have to understand that there's a very, very important midrash that says that until the giving of the Torah at Sinai, there was a physical, spiritual decree that upper reality could only descend so far, and lower reality could only ascend so far. We know on the first verse, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But along with that there was a certain division. That's why in the second day of creation, it's all about the division of the upper waters and the lower waters. And so that represents there was a certain break, a certain gulf between what we'll call spiritual and physical, soul and body. But at Mount Sinai, this decree was canceled. How do we know that? Because the verse says God descended onto Mount Sinai. And then it says, and Moshe ascended to the mountain. So this represents the cancellation of that decree. But before the decree was canceled, there's a midrash that says that God, as it were privy to his thought process. And God says, if I create human beings from the higher reality, he will never die. If I create him from the lower reality, he will die and maybe really never live. So therefore, I will create him from both the higher and lower reality. If he is a good person, he will live and not die. If he's not such a good person, he will die. This goes back to the whole thing with eating of the tree of good and evil. Because God said, once you eat from it, you will surely die. So that's one midrash. But another midrash takes the same theme. And for those of you who have my book, Life, Soul, and Consciousness Within All Creation, this midrash I'm about to say plays a very, very important part. This midrash says that when God created, he created the world in 6 days, very balanced between upper reality and lower reality. On the first day, God created heaven and earth. He created both. There's a harmony. The second day, though, God separated between above and below. The third day is about how all the waters were gathered together and the earth was revealed. That's lower. The fourth day is all about the sun, the moon, and the stars, the upper. The fifth day is about the fish and the birds, below and a little bit above. And the sixth day were the animals. So it's below, but now there's a little bit of imbalance. And so God created a human being from both above and below to balance out all of creation. In one of Rav Ginsburg's books, I'm just going to mention it. He goes into great depth to this. And this, again, for those who have life, soul, and consciousness within all creation, the premise is that there is a spark of life in all levels, whether it's mineral, vegetable, animal, or human. And there is a level of soul and consciousness, even in the inanimate. And the book goes through all of the scientific research about the vegetable kingdom and revelations about consciousness within the vegetable world. Animals, of course, have a certain level of consciousness, and of course, human beings. And Rav Ginsburg says that because human beings are the last creation, that every other creation is drawn towards having human consciousness. Now, this actually is being played out in quantum physics today. The whole idea of consciousness and being drawn towards higher level of consciousness. This is, it's actually one of the biggest discussions right now, which I'm not going to go into, is about AI. Is AI somehow going to develop consciousness beyond what we are programming it? It's a huge concern. It's a huge concern if it's possible. Maybe it's not possible. Many people, including, I watched the video myself, the person who invented AI, you could see it on YouTube, was saying he is extremely concerned about AI being able to make this leap towards what we might call human consciousness. Anyways, so now I'll just bring one other thing, and because we mentioned this before, the idea of in the Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that actually one of the, call it simplest, what's called kavana, when we say that God is one, is the aleph of the word one equals one. That represents God who is one. The chet of echad equals 8. This is the one God is coming, descending through the 7 heavens to the earth. 7 and 1 equals 8. The dalet of echad equals 4, which are the 4 directions. And we're told that that is we'll call it the mission of the Jewish people, is to assist God to descend from above all physical reality through the 7 heavens to the earth, and then to spread ufaratsta, to spread to the 4 directions. But here again, we have the idea of the unity between above and below. How does all of this connect to Rosh Hashanah? That's why I wanted to give this over right now. So one of the things that Rav Ginsburg says is that, and it's brought down, that had Adam not eaten from the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, he would have been the first Jew. He would have been the first Jew, and everyone who came out of Adam and Eve would have been Jewish. That's why we learned that the first incarnation of Adam was really in Avraham. And Avram becomes the first Jew. And every Jew who would ever be born, including any convert, comes from Avram and Sarah. We're told all the years that they were having intimate relations, but not producing physical children, they were producing the souls of all future converts. That's why a convert is called a son or daughter of Avram and Sarah, because it's considered they quite literally gave birth to their souls. So Rav Ginsburg says, if you take the word Adam and Yisrael, Adam would have been the first Yisrael. Adam and Yisrael together, Yisrael is 541, Adam is 45. Together they equal 586, equals shofar, equals shofar. What do we say on Rosh Hashanah? According to tradition, Rosh Hashanah technically is not the first day of creation. We say it's the 6th day of creation when Adam is created. The first day of creation is the 25th of Elul, which, one second. Which is tomorrow night and Thursday is the 25th of Elul. That is considered the first day of creation. Yet, on Rosh Hashanah, we say, Zeh hayom techilat ma'asecha, zikaron liyom rishon. This is the day, the beginning of your deeds. We're talking to God. A remembrance of the first day of creation. So, first I want to go back to Mount Sinai again. that when this decree was canceled, Rav Ginsburg says that is the true transition from Ma'aseh Bereishit to Ma'aseh Merkavah. It's as if after Sinai, we're now in a different age. We're in the age of Ma'aseh Merkavah. And that's why the verse introducing the Ten Commandments, Vayedaber Elokim et kol hadavarim ha'ela lemor, is exactly 7 words and 28 letters. The first verse of the Torah is exactly 7 words and 28 letters. Bereishit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. They're both 7 words and 28 letters, and they're both Elokim, the name Elokim. And the very important Rashi that is also talking about the 6th day is that Rashi points out that every day of creation ends Vahi Erev, Vahi Boker, 1 day, 2nd day, 3rd day, 4th day. Only on the 6th day it says Vahi Erev, Vahi Boker, Yom HaShishi, the 6th day. All the other ones are, it was evening and there was morning, 2nd day, not the 2nd day. So Rashi asks, why on the 6th day is the letter Hey added? And he explains, it's one of the most important Rashis in the entire Torah. He says, because it's hinting to another 6th day. What other 6th day? The 6th of Sivan, the day that the Torah was given. And Rashi says that until the Torah was given, the entire physical universe was, in Hebrew it's called al tanai, on condition. On condition of what? On condition that the Torah would be introduced into the world. In other words, without a moral, ethical compass, there's no purpose to a physical world. There's no purpose to a physical world. Without human beings who have a moral and ethical compass, there's no purpose for creation. So Rashi says, God says to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, if you accept the Torah today, good. If not, I will return the world to chaos and void. Meaning, there's no reason for this world. So the introduction of Torah in the world is the very purpose of the world. And there's a very, very famous scientist. His name is Wheeler. I believe he's a Nobel Prize recipient. And he's among a growing number. I watch these YouTubes all the time about consciousness and quantum physics. And Wheeler says exactly what Rashi said. He doesn't know the Rashi. He was saying it from a purely scientific point of view. And he said, if human consciousness would not have been in the program from the beginning of creation, creation could not have happened. That's what he says. He hit it. He hit the nail. He hit the hammer on the nail. He was not coming from a Jewish point of view. He was pointing out. Now you can see now there's scores of YouTubes from a scientific point of view who are saying that human consciousness is not a product of the brain. The brain channels consciousness which is everywhere. Consciousness is universal. And according to us, what is this consciousness? Hashem Echad, the creator. The creator is the consciousness. The creator is the observer. Of course, in quantum physics, there's such an emphasis on observation. Without observation, there's a whole question if reality exists at all. God is the constant observer. So Rav Ginsburg points out, I'm going back to this verse, Zeh hayom techilat ma'asecha, zikaron leyom rishon. This is the day, the beginning of your deeds, a remembrance of the first day. So he points out that the word ma'asecha is in the plural. So you might say, okay, that makes sense, the beginning of your deeds. But Rav Ginsburg says, on a deeper level, what it means is the unity of Ma'aseh Bereishit and Ma'aseh Merkavah. That from the beginning, that was God's deeds, his creation of the world, but also the creation of human beings who are murkav, who are complex, who are the chariot, the avot, hen hamerkava. And so Rav Ginsburg points out at the end of this piece, in a certain way, what would be the equivalent today of canceling this decree that separates the upper worlds from the lower worlds. And he says what is needed today is to, as it were, cancel the consciousness that is separating science from Torah. He said that decree needs to be canceled. And there has to be a concerted effort to show the unity of science and Torah. Of course, Rav Ginsburg has dedicated the last 50 years of his teaching to doing just that, not just physics, all science, all art, whatever, whether it's healing or medicine or psychology or biology or astronomy or music or political science or education or communication, business, whatever it is, it must be shown to be unified with Torah. So, in short, what he's saying is Rosh Hashanah, this is the birth of human beings. This is an invitation for us all to understand the secrets of Ma'aseh Bereishit and Ma'aseh Merkavah. That is what we've been trying to do for the last 3 months. I certainly am not claiming that we have gotten there. But Rosh Hashanah is a new beginning. And that new beginning is understanding how a human being, which in a certain way is the most complex of all of God's creations, how a complicated human being with all of our emotions, all of our intellect, all of our drives, with a good inclination and an evil inclination, with a body and a soul, with previous lifetimes, with prophetic powers that can see the future. All of this, how do we fit into the creation? Because as Rav Ginsburg says, Ma'aseh Bereishit leads into Ma'aseh Merkavah, meaning if you look at the last words of the seventh day of creation, it is Asher bara Elokim la'asot, that God made to do. So everyone asks, the last word is very redundant. What do you mean? God made, stop. What do you mean God made to do? So it's explained that that word la'asot means to rectify, and that God ended creation with the message that human beings have to become a partner with God in the further creation of the world. Because the world is being recreated at every split second. And it is for the human being to help God to finish creation, as it were. Creation, in a certain way, will never be finished, but to become a partner with God in the development of creation. And that is the transition that Rav Ginsburg is trying to teach us from Ma'aseh Bereishit to Ma'aseh Merkavah. And so we need to unify science and Torah. We need to unify our own body and soul. We have to unify in the way that we live, our perception and our lifestyle in a physical world, and to integrate spiritual reality, to bring physical and spiritual together, body and soul, and all of the opposites: chashmal, silence and speech, above and below, masculine and feminine, every kind of opposite. In our discussions of Ma'aseh Merkavah, that was one of the major themes, is the unification of opposites, the chashmal. May we be blessed in this coming year to take everything that we've learned and try to really integrate it into our lives in a broader sense. It should be a year of an end to this terrible war here, 2 years of warfare. Quite literally, until the minute we went on, my wife and I were in our bomb shelters because there was a siren. We're still deep in a conflict. We need victory in order to bring peace. We have to bring our hostages home. We have to defeat once and for all our enemies' belief that they can destroy us. As long as they believe they can destroy us, there will never be peace here. It's only when we can somehow prove to them that we cannot be destroyed will we be able to make peace. Everyone in their own lives should have a refuah shlema. Everyone should have good friends, good influencers. Everyone should come closer to Torah, come closer to the Creator. We should continue as a learning community, and we should experience everything good this year.